I was saying?
Parts of it.
Confessed to a murder. Okay, so thanks everyone for being here. This is you can feel the intelligence of this room. It's a super smart room, so I'm really excited to tell you a little bit about what I do, and hopefully leave some time at the end to get some of your feedback. So as Bianca was saying, I study this thing that I've been calling massive media. So I study it and I also make work about it. But I should probably tell you what I mean by that. So you might have seen massive media at the top of the Empire State Building, for example. Every night, there's a different pattern up there. It was pretty interesting back in 2006, I believe, during the presidential election. It was kind of real-time data visualization, and we had the blue versus the red going on here. Republicans and Democrats, and you could watch that happening in real time. You could also see massive media on Instagram, so people taking pictures of these things, the conversations that are centered upon these expressive architectural surfaces. Lots of other places and lots of other uses for this medium. Harbin, China, the light festival that's been going on there for a while. My new home as of next month, they've got a light festival. Lots of cities in the world have light festivals. This is growing in popularity, in number around the world. Celebrations, civic celebrations, the anniversary of San Francisco, and of course, art. So we have artists like Raphael Lozano-Hemmer, this piece called Body Movies, where people would stand in between these high-powered lights, revealing another projection, the images of people in their own city, computer tracking their silhouette once they matched the images that they revealed of their neighbors and their fellow citizens. The image would then advance. So massive media encompasses these expressive architectural surfaces. It tells stories about a place. It connects people near and far. Also in the form of urban screens. We have lots of urban screens in Toronto. This is an example of a network of urban screens that was installed across the UK during the Olympics. And of course, you've seen it very accurately predicted in films as well. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about film because part of my background is film studies, and so I try to connect some of these concepts. But let me give you a definition of massive media now that you've seen what I think are some examples. So let's start with the massive part. Well, that's pretty obvious. The scale, the size, the visibility that comes with that scale. That's part of what massive media is. Then the media part. Images, sound, interactivity, communication technology, networks. So you put these two things together, and I think you have something that is certainly growing in popularity, growing in number, and I think something that we need to pay more attention to. So a term like massive media pushes us because it's important for us to think about these situations as powerful sites for supporting a more participatory healthy culture in which we identify and engage with collective presence, memory, and action through information, architecture, and moving image. So that's basically my thesis there. During this talk, I'm going to break down massive media into 3 parts. So we're going to talk about massive media in terms of expanded cinema. So there's going to be a little bit of film theory that I'm going to bring up to help us understand how to better use these spaces critically, creatively, how to analyze these spaces, and how to also connect them to a tradition of media that already exists. I'm going to talk about massive media as public data visualization, so people that are interested in mapping, really thinking about, and data and data visualizations, really thinking about the ways that we can have site-specific visualizations. And then finally, I'll talk about curation. So we may think about this in terms of the Section 37 stuff, thinking about public art. Maybe if this is a new area that we have to think about how we can program and support these large-scale expressive architectural displays. So let's start with some film theory. I won't spend too much time on it, but I'll tell you that there's three things that happen in film that I think we can connect to massive media. So the first thing is superimposition. So what's superimposition? There's a film theorist, his name's Tom Gunning, and he says superimposition is an incongruous juxtaposition of images in film that yields an eerie encounter of two ontologically separate worlds. Okay, that's a jumble of words there. Basically, let's think about a film like Psycho. So we have this scene at the end of Psycho. We have, can anyone remember his name?
Norman Bates.
Norman Bates. We have Norman Bates. And we have the image of a swamp kind of coming in behind him at the same time. This is a filmic trope that we call superimposition that's connecting these two separate spaces, these two separate worlds, but expressing something without it in the process. Of course, this is all happening in film studies. We would call it diegetically. Diegetic means within the frame. So everything's happening within the frame in the theater. When we take moving images outdoors, all of a sudden we have productive juxtapositions both within the frame and then also outside of it. So if we extend the potential for this kind of hybridity, for this mixing of worlds. This is an example from Quebec City. This is the Moulin à Images, one of, I think, still the largest outdoor projection. It went on for 5 summers, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Quebec City. I'll show you a few more images of that. And maybe even a little video, just to give you a sense. I've got a couple of videos here, just to give you a sense of the scale. So there's a superposition that's happening, one in the images that are being projected onto a building that has its own historical meaning. It's called the bungee, these are the grain silos at the foot of Quebec City. So a symbol of industrialization, and perhaps industrialization that is now changing into creative production. Hence, very cleverly, the name the image mill. So it gets us to think about what cities are becoming in a way. I really wish I had seen this in person, but caught onto it just after it finished. There's also a juxtaposition outside of the frame, so superimposition of what's happening on this screen and the space around it. So it borrows meaning from the building and from the space around it. It's telling the story of Quebec City. We can imagine in that space this happening, let's say, on the hills surrounding the spectators here. So this brings me to another aspect of film studies we call montage. This one might be a little more familiar. There's a relationship very similar to superimposition between what I call massive media and montage. So this is textbook film studies. This is what you would call the cool shot effect. It's basically how montage works. It's the juxtaposition of different shots with one another, cutting and recombining film to create meaning. This is one of the essential elements of film. So we have a man, we have a bowl of soup, he must be hungry. We have a man, we have a dead child, he must be sad. We have a man, we have a woman lying on a couch, he must be interested in her. So this is how montage works. There's also montage within frames, so what we would call a spatial montage, and that's more common now with CGI and the ability to create juxtapositions within a frame. But, of course, these are all still, even within your mobile phone, within your computer, within the cinema, still diegetic, still all within the frame. Rarely does the image call out to things that are outside of the frame. This commercial might be familiar. This is one of the few examples that I can think of that's like that. It's a Skittles commercial that asks you to put your finger on the Skittle, and this man that looks like a cat comes up and licks it for you. So a rare example of something that assumes some action outside of the frame. But of course, with massive media, works like this piece called Megaphone, which was at the Quartier du Spectacle in Montreal, permanent projection sites, which I think would be amazing if we had such things in Toronto, to be able to basically not just plug in. It takes a bit more work than that, but it's great installations like this one where people would go and in the space around the screen speak into Megaphone. Words would be selected out of that, projected onto this building. There was a conversation between the building and the people around them, passers-by, people engaged in it. There were lectures. So this is another example of how montage changes when we take it outdoors. It becomes more complex. We have a greater narrative flexibility. There's more that we can say and do with film, and there's more that we can say and do with the city because of the moving image. Finally, and maybe most importantly, there's these concepts of apparatus and dispositif. So apparatus refers to the technical aspects of the delivery of moving image. So how we are delivered to the experience of media. So in a cinema, that is the hidden projector, the cushy seats, no windows. These are things that we don't always think about, but they're things that are really important to creating a connection between you and what's on the screen. Now there's this other term, dispositif. This is a fancy French theory term that basically is an extension of the apparatus of spectatorship. It's about how you are then delivered to a certain meaning, delivered to ideologies, delivered to narratives, delivered to a, let's say, subject position within a film, how you identify with a character and the things that that character stands for. So those things are connected. So with new architectures and affordances of the moving image, we have so many new possibilities in terms of the technical apparatus of spectatorship, but also how we deliver people to certain messages and how the meaning changes and perhaps is amplified because of the setting, because of how we recenter people within an urban space, especially an urban space that's full of distractions. How do we capture people's attention? Well, one way, massive media, the scale, the visibility of something like the Empire State Building, but then having something, there was an installation called Racing Extinction, so they were projecting images of species that were nearing extinction on this building. And I believe there was audio that people could tap into through a radio signal. So finding new ways to recombine the elements that make up the experience of the moving image, of media, and thinking of that, about that creatively and critically. So that's something that I've been doing in my practice. So I've worked a lot with Patricio Davila. He's a prof at OCAD, and we've expanded to include a lot of other people, and we call ourselves the Public Visualization Studio. We did an installation called The Line, and this was up at the Markham Museum. It was a projection on a 200-year-old barn, and we tried to address themes of land use and food security in an area in the fastest growing suburb in North America, Markham. So we built this fence, and we call this piece The Line. Basically, we're thinking about lines like fences and roads, parking lots, shopping malls, all of these things that have sort of inscribed and re-inscribed the landscape and have directed people and directed development. And so we use this as a way to get people to reflect on that. Hopefully in a setting that was also contributed somehow to that meeting. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I think I have more than 20 minutes worth of stuff, so I'll go a little quicker. Here's another image. And thinking about those elements that we talked about. So thinking about montage, thinking about superimposition, thinking about apparatus. So creating spaces for people to experience this presentation. Thinking about why this content works in this specific place. Thinking about how it interacts with the space around it. So now I want to move on to public data visualization. So this is another category of massive media. So we already talked about the Empire State Building quite a bit. A few examples. We already saw the election example. But it's also used for commercial purposes. Who's going to win? Something that they have every year during the Super Bowl. We already talked about how that engages larger networks, and that's part of the massive part of that massive media. It's about the size of the networks that are engaged, in part because of the scale and visibility and the importance of these types of buildings. I would argue in a way that there's a proportional relationship between the size of the networks engaged and the visibility and centrality of the building. So this is a map of, or just a sense of all the different uses, and this has gone out every day since I think 2008 on the building. And actually reflects quite a range of uses that something, this kind of low resolution, large scale display, very similar to our CN Tower actually, can be. So there's commercial examples, so they'll change it to a certain set of colors for the 30th anniversary of Lion King on Broadway. City branding purposes, so I Love New York Night, and they'll do some animation and sounds that you can tap into through the radio. Politics, as we saw, but then also cultural celebrations. So the Empire State Building, it used to take 7 people 12 hours to change the gels on these humongous lights that they had. This was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now they can do it at the press of a button. So it's no longer just Hanukkah, Christmas, maybe one other holiday. It's a whole range of religious and cultural events that are celebrated on. So I think that points us towards more of what I think we should be doing with these types of buildings. I think we should be using them critically and creatively. So I was able to experiment a little bit with a building in Toronto, the Ryerson Image Arts Building. So we created a project called In the Air Tonight. We thought about, okay, how can we use this type of large-scale public display? And so this video kind of explains a little bit. I'll talk over talk because there's no voiceover. So the building's displaying this blue wave. We've got a little weather station on the roof, and we're getting wind speed information from that. Every time somebody uses the hashtag homelessness, the building glows red. We have a mobile website interface that allows you to view tweets. If you don't have Twitter, you can retweet and tweet from there. Or you can go onto Twitter and do this as well. We had a webcam so people could participate remotely and see the results of their tweeting and retweeting about this issue. And so a few things that we wanted to do with this. One, we wanted to use the scale and visibility of this building to draw attention to this important issue. We did some research and we saw that this was the hashtag that people are organizing themselves around. We saw that there were lots of activists and lots of policy people using Twitter as a way to share information about best practices. We thought this is a great way to get people that don't normally look for that hashtag on Twitter to go and read more about it, hopefully find out more, be directed to places where they could donate some time or money to helping to do something about homelessness. And not only that, to learn more about the issue. So we know that homelessness isn't as simple as getting people off the streets. It's about creating housing. And so there's also that element. So those three parts, getting people to learn more about the issue by engaging with that, with the project, and then hopefully finding ways to act through that. So really just creating this amplification of sorts. So the final part I want to talk to you about is how we can better support these types of spaces. And so when cities become screens, I would say they require coordination and curation. They become exhibition spaces. So our cities are becoming more and more like exhibition spaces. We need the continued presence of progressive venues, places like Interaccess that could get involved in this type of programming because of their expertise, curatorial groups and strategies that can help to support more critical and creative uses, which I think are important for cities, the dialogue within cities for us to learn more about what actually matters to us, not just about what the new shirts are at H&M. This is a great example. Has anyone been to Celebration Square in Mississauga?
Across the street from
All right. Do you feel like it's a good example? I feel like you would know better than I would in a way. But I've been impressed every time I've gone there to see the type of
I
programming
agree.
they
I
have.
got to be based it, so I think it's a great example.
Okay. So, two big urban screens, stage in the middle, very easy to plug into that and have cultural events that are, again, amplified and bring lots of people into them. So, an amazing resource, no commercials or anything on it. And here's a project that I've been working on. So, it took me years and years to get Ryerson to allow me to do that in the Air Tonight project. And I realized that there's got to be a better way for students to engage with the building. So baseline, that's like proof of concept, let's show the school that they have this amazing $3 million asset. It's like basically they have this Ferrari and they just left it in the driveway. It's been on screensaver the whole time. Allow students to request lighting changes for various events, causes, and concerns. So turn this into a community resource. It's not that hard. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of money, some organization. Most of the money was to get the thing up there, and they did that a long time ago, but this often happens with these types of buildings. There isn't necessarily a plan in place with how to program and curate that, how to treat it as an exhibition space, how to treat it as a community resource. We need to think about that more. So, a few things to leave you with. This concept of massive media that I introduced, it's an important and interdisciplinary site of inquiry, touches on film, media, monumentality, theater, data visualization, public space. We can look at it historically, theoretically, and creatively. Massive media is only becoming more massive, and with more media, it's a force to be reckoned with. This is the largest screen in the world in Hong Kong, the ICC Tower. They're big canvases for big issues, big art, big business, big communities, and big data. And I think they require collaborative, sustained, technically informed, locally and globally engaged, artistic, academic, and curatorial approach to explore their creative and critical possibilities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we have some time for questions. If anybody has that. And then we did you hear the ad from my way around?
Thank you so much for your Rising project. I'm a writing student, and I never know about. I looked at the amazing language, but I didn't know what's that about. So right now I know about it. Thank you again. So my question is that massive media is a very good way to get attention. So usually that is a trigger for people who want to do some changes. Like for example, the project we mentioned that they can use Twitter, follow the hashtags, and do the name. So my question is that when you have massive media, you get attention, is a trigger for people to do something, but how you can continue with that vision, how to get people to act on that
Yeah, that's a good question because, yeah, once you have their attention, what do you do with them? And I think that's something that the extensions through social media and the communities that hopefully people are tapping into as a result extend that participation and that engagement. So one thing that we heard from our In the Internet project, there were people that heard about this project and then went on and participated and then found like-minded colleagues that, you know, they were perhaps working in Toronto in housing and homelessness, and they found like-minded colleagues from Australia or from England that were attracted to the project as well. So it became this, actually that was a more important outcome of the project in a way. So I think, yeah, the connection to this, the building itself hopefully is just like a volcano erupting. There's all this data, there's all this information. It's a way of helping to remind us, to connect us back to, let's say, a data stream that we think is more politically relevant or more important for the community to engage with. So, and it allows the community to see that people are engaging with that without actually going onto that network, to see that it is something that is relevant to their community, and people in their community do care about that.
See your hands here. If there's other hands, please stick them way up so I don't miss you. Okay, so I'm going to do like a little loop here. So go ahead.
Is I guess kind of in the same vein, is there like a conversation in mass media community about how to measure, like before doing a display, understanding like how will you know if it's saying, I noticed like there was a lot of the word hopefully in that, and I'm really curious, you know, like is there a way to validate whether hopes were, you know, followed through, or that's very tough to do, I imagine. But.
That's tough to do, and I feel like there's a lot of people in this room that could help me out with that, actually, so I'd love to chat with people about that a little more. Myself and Patricio were sort of artists first, and that part has been a hard go for us. We've collected all the tweets that we got during that period, and tried to analyze them a little bit. We've got some data from Suite, and that's about as far as we've gone, but we can do a lot better than that. So I'm happy to hear.
Work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the information. My question is about measurement as well. And it's a bit philosophical, but I really think about this a lot. How do you measure? Are we better off doing something like this about homelessness, or spend the money that we're going to spend to distribute meals or to do something else?
Yeah.
So I think, art is different, but I think art is also questionable.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that we are really focusing our money and efforts trying to solve the biggest problems and trying to use the best medium to solve it?
Yeah. A few things about that. It didn't cost that much money. But that was a lot of free labor on our part, let's say. It did cost $3 million to make this building, but the building was not built for that purpose. So part of what I'm advocating for is for people to open up the space for these types of expressions. So non-commercial, community run, more democratic uses of space. Is this necessarily the only and best way? No, but I think it's an important conversation about urban space. That building is at the center of the highest concentration of drop-in centers and homeless shelters in the country. Do we know about that? Do we talk about that? Is that front of mind when you're walking through the space? Not necessarily. And if it is, I think then that is an important first step in terms of changing our values and beliefs. So I think it is important. I think dialogue is important, and I think